We continue to witness the worst child protection crisis in the world. 11 years into the Syrian conflict, the humanitarian crisis is worse than ever. More than 13 million Syrians have been affected by the ongoing war and persecution, and 6.2 million, including 2.5 million children, are now internally displaced. World Vision is witnessing human rights abuses that continue unabated by all parties to the conflict, and the grave violations against children remained alarmingly high. A report from the UN Secretary General to the Security Council last year, June, on children and armed conflict really highlights violations against children by those involved in the conflict. The violations in a climate of complete and total impunity include killing and maiming of children, recruitment or use of children as soldiers, sexual violence against children, abduction of children, attacks against schools and hospitals, and the denial of humanitarian access to children. These need to stop now. World Vision took on the challenge last year to look at the impact that 10 years of war inside Syria have had on children and child's rights, on Syria's economic growth in terms of GDP, and on its human capital, with a specific focus on Syria's children. The findings were extremely concerning. The Syrian war has cost 1.2 trillion in today's money, and it can rise up to an additional 1.4 trillion until 2035. If the war was to stop now, and if we do not consider the impact on education, on healthcare, and other basic services that are needed for children. All of this is the result of a continuous cycle of grave violations against children themselves, girls and boys, the heavy economic costs and the shattered opportunities for future generations. World Vision is calling on everyone to stop the war now if we are to make sure that we do not lose a generation. Syria is not a safe country. This is attested by the children that World Vision spoke to, both in Jordan, Syria and Lebanon last year, and also more recently, early this year, with Syrian children inside the widow camps. They all want peace, and more than 80% of the child refugees World Vision spoke to do not think they will be able to return to Syria within the next 2 years. Those inside the country also share similar concerns. But what we are most concerned of are the children and the women from the hardest to reach places in the widow camps across northwest Syria, where tens of thousands of widows and other single women, including women who are divorced, whose husbands are missing, and their children, are living in the barely 28 accessible camps across the region. These women and their children face chronic and high levels of violence, including neglect, child labor, verbal, physical, and sexual abuse, including child marriage. Boys particularly are at a risk of recruitment into armed groups and later on radicalization. This is because boys older than 11 years old are considered male adults by the community and are forced to leave the camps and their mothers with no place to go, no employment prospects, and no future. World Vision is looking at supporting these particular vulnerable groups, and across northwest Syria, all of those that are hard to reach and most vulnerable. According to World Vision, the most prominent human rights violation inside Syria during 2021 was access. Humanitarian access is critical to supporting and providing the needed services to the populations in need. And Syria is the most dangerous country to deliver life assistance and humanitarian services to, with 272 aid workers being killed as of December 2020. Denial of humanitarian access actually has served to disconnect children from mental health and psychosocial support, education, health care, shelter, food, clean water and sanitation, as well as protection. On top of that, every single year when the UN Security Council is negotiating the cross-border resolution that provides access into northwest Syria and other parts of northern Syria for aid agencies and UN agencies, well, every single year 20,000 Syrian women and almost 53,000 gender-based violence survivors, including children themselves, may face reduced access to activities that are aimed at addressing their traumas, providing support and preventing gender-based violence against them. Also, this is happening in a context where 75% of all of the child casualties reported across Syria last year were recorded in Northwest, along with 9 out of 10 attacks on schools and 7 out of 10 children recruited and used in the conflict. This is unacceptable, and as a child rights organization, World Vision is calling on protecting these children and making sure no one is harmed. World Vision has been supporting the Syrian displaced population since the beginning of the war in 2011. This year, however, Syria faced the harshest winter recorded so far, with temperatures dropping to -14 degrees. Snow has covered the camps, where 1.7 million women and girls are living in overcrowded tents and unfinished buildings and settlements. Mothers are scared for their children's lives. Children themselves died in one of the widow camps already due to the freezing winter conditions and the poor conditions due to their housing arrangements. Also, just in the middle of the winter in January, 66,000 tents were partially damaged, while an estimated 1,700 were completely damaged, either because of the snow or because of the heavy rainfall. These people inside Syria's displacement camps have the toughest choice to make: keep themselves safe from the bombing that already kills civilians almost every day, or choosing between food or heating gas. They also have to make another choice, whether they can afford to keep themselves healthy from the COVID-19 virus and other type of illnesses. It's a tough call to make, especially when we witness this every winter and every year, and we hear the same harrowing stories. To put an end to them suffering, we need to make sure the humanitarian actors are able to provide the assistance these people need in the midst of the global pandemic. They need medicine, they need drugs, they need pharmaceutical equipment, and they need health clinics that are open and where they can actually go to. The complexity of the European Union and the US sanctions has limited indeed the capacity of all the international community and local organizations and international organizations to deliver humanitarian aid, particularly when it comes to paying salaries, importing certain items, or receiving funds that are awarded for their activities. What we need to make sure is that the international community reviews and addresses the negative impacts of these sanctions on civilians inside Syria, in accordance with the already existing recommendations of the Special Rapporteur on the negative impact of the unilateral coercive measures, who actually has identified serious human rights concerns in the application of the Caesar Act, for example, including people's rights to housing, healthcare, and an adequate standard of living and development. World Vision, as a child rights organization who has been supporting the Syrian population inside the country since the beginning of the war, truly believes that the international community must do everything in their power to improve the human rights situation inside Syria. For this, we need to make sure that all parties to the conflict, including the Syrian Arab Republic, ends the ongoing armed conflict and finds a political and democratic solution to the ongoing war under the UN's leadership. All parties to the conflict must also fully respect international humanitarian law, sparing and protecting civilian populations from the hazards of armed conflict, and fully respects international humanitarian law, especially the Convention of the Rights of the Child. World Vision believes that it's in our power to make sure that children, wherever they are, especially in war-torn contexts, are safe from any form of violence.